As usual, here on Midnight's Edge, you're listening to Kevin and Andre, and today we actually are lucky enough to have a very special guest for the show, who goes by Troll in the Dungeon, who has been chronicling the development of Fantastic Four and been a huge help to us. What has made this production so interesting to you?
Let the games begin! What's made it interesting to me is, for one, I was actually looking forward to the film long before it was released. Like, I was looking forward to, like, a different take on the Fantastic Four, and then as I heard more and more about it, I'm like, I don't have any confidence in this movie. And then when I looked into the troubles of the production, right around the time they started saying that Trank was doing all these drugs and throwing a fit on the set, that was when I started looking back and saying, okay, there are some warning signs here. And then I eventually came up with a huge post about it on IMDb. I think you guys named the first video in your series after it, or at least you used Trankgate.
This is the originator of the name Trankgate, which of course we have done everything we can to make popular.
I had no idea. I humbly bow to you.
Well, thanks. At this point, though, I'm starting to hear, like, people might want to start calling it Foxgate.
Well, I would say that Foxgate has already been, that was X-Men Origins Wolverine. That was Foxgate. This is Trankgate.
Well, it's kind of a continuation of the same thing. I mean, it's really interesting to follow Fox's corporate trouble over the years. As for the reception for Fantastic Four, which, you know, we're just coming off of release weekend here, we already knew last week that it was getting just destroyed by critics. I think even people who denied this movie's problems are kind of coming over to the side of, no, this movie was a steaming pile. So some of the signs we see here, for one thing, the movie's going to come in second place, which that's even a revised downward projection.
Can't ruse the cruise. Or can't defuse the cruise or abuse the cruise.
That's also something really interesting regarding the projections, because the movie, like 2 weeks before release, it was projected to open to about 55 million, and then it was downgraded to 50 to 45 million closer to release, and then the first negative word of mouth hit, and then it was downgraded to 40, no longer 45, but 40-ish. It was struggling to reach 30, and now it's going to open in the mid-20s, to second place behind Mission Impossible, which is a holdover from last week. So this, of course, is hugely embarrassing for Fox. It's also a little bit intriguing, because with the movies from Marvel Studios, the proper Marvel movies, you have had this tendency that they always have to revise the predictions upwards, because the movies tend to overperform more than you thought. You saw this with Captain America the Winter Soldier, you saw it with Guardians of the Galaxy, and you really saw it with the Avengers, obviously. But here, they have to take the predictions downwards, and the movie still comes in even lower.
Sad, because it's like, the numbers are lower not only than Green Lantern, which was also a flop that had a respectable opening weekend, except this doesn't have a respectable opening weekend, but it came lower than Seth Rogen's The Dude Weed LMAO guy, The Green Hornet, which is not based on an ongoing superhero property that's like Marvel or DC. This is like a radio/television character from way back when. So if that does better than this, then that should be telling you that something went wrong.
I think what really did a number on it was also the word of mouth and the later reviews. You can tell this at Rotten Tomatoes, because the movie sits at 9% on Rotten Tomatoes, which makes it the worst Marvel-based movie ever, bar none. It sits below Howard the Duck. It sits below Punisher Warzone.
It's actually even squeaked below Elektra, which has garnered a whopping 10%.
Right.
And if we go beyond Marvel, Jonah Hex.
I think it's slightly above Catwoman, but that's really not saying a whole lot that your superhero movie is better than Catwoman.
Both are 9%.
And something that's also of interest is I checked Pro Box Office. Like, they have like this thing where they track social media references, and they were tracking like the positive negative tweets, and then the ratio between positive tweets and negative tweets are 0 to 1. So it's
immeasurable.
Yes, like it is immeasurably negative. And I noticed like there was a whole lot of bile about everything. The predominating opinion was, please give the rights back to Marvel. Please sell them back. We beg of you.
Something really pleasing for a Marvel fan to hear. And I think that's also a big reason why the movie has performed as it did, because many see through it. At least many of the built-in audience. The tracking is misleading.
What do you guys make of the few positive reviews? I felt like I was seeing a lot of blame against the internet for basically being really mean.
I have seen some comments about blaming it on racism on the IMDb forums that most people are dismissing, which, thank goodness. I was around, I lurked the IMDb boards. There was a time when there was actually racist, ugly, disgusting comments being posted there, and that time has long since passed. On that specific forum, I can't speak for IMDb as a whole. As far as, the critics, I know that Devin Ferrasi from Badass Digest, who I'm not a fan of, aside from his occasional inside scoops, I know he was pals with Trank. He confirmed that Trank's butthole dog account was his own. I don't know if he said it. I don't know if he said that in particular, but he did confirm that at one point. And I do think he has been shilling for the movie, just based on how he's been reporting.
There are many who have, and that's one thing that I noticed in particular with this production, that there have been loads of media who are really behind it and really wanted it to succeed. AMC Movie Talk, before they became Collider Movie Talk, were huge fans of it and backing it and rejecting all of the rumors and everything. And the same with LA Times, which has essentially been a Fox marketing mouthpiece, and multiple others. So of course now the backtracking has begun.
Collider, apparently their sources have confirmed at least 3 action sequences were cut, not from the movie itself, but from the draft that they were writing right before production began. So they just took 3 huge set pieces out, presumably to save on budget.
Of course, this came after Josh Trank himself posted a new tweet where he distanced himself from the movie, essentially saying that there was a really good cut at it 1 year ago.
What Trank said specifically was that a year ago I had a fantastic version of this and it would have received great reviews. You'll probably never see it. That's reality, though. It's always nice when you can hide behind a movie nobody saw.
Especially when said movie was apparently the cut that Bleeding Cool said at least one executive called a mess.
They may not have had something awesome to start with, but everybody is just blown away by how uninspiring the new cut is.
Presumably, the original cut at least would have been consistent throughout, because right now it feels like 2 or even 3 different movies spliced together. So Trank's original cut probably is no Jodorowsky's Dune, in that it probably is no long-lost masterpiece we'll never see. There we mentioned this news from Collider, but Entertainment Weekly also had something to say, kind of confirm what Collider already said, in that Fox made alterations to the movie just before production was about to begin. But they also gave Trank resistance in terms of the casting and the story and the budget and everything else. He apparently did not deal with this very well. But since this article was initially published, several high-level sources close to Fantastic Four, spoken to independently of each other, have told Entertainment Weekly the rift on set was not about creative differences, but rather combative and abusive behavior Trank demonstrated toward the crew, producers, studio, and even the stars. It's partly linked to Trank's personal disputes involving accusations of deliberate damage done to the house he was renting as revenge over a dispute with the landlord, which sources say eventually manifested on set as hostility and frustration from Trank.
So basically, they're trying to push the story out into Entertainment Weekly that this is all Trank's fault and he's a monster. So we're trying to swerve the narrative back to the original story.
It's interesting. It's not even like you can blame this one on the dog. They actually blame Trank for the thing, and I think that makes more sense that he would be more responsible for it than, say, 5 German Shepherds or teacup Chihuahuas or whatever.
Yeah. Well, he said something interesting during the whole 4chan debacle, didn't he? That he had actually drawn in the house.
There was a second 4chan debacle. Like, the biggest thing out of it was apparently, like, he didn't abuse Kate Mara. No, she shat herself while smoking weed. I don't think that was the actual Trank. If multiple sources were purporting that there were abuse issues going on, there were probably abuse issues going on. But of course, I don't think all of the blame rests at Trank. I think a lot of it does, though.
What I take from this is that it all essentially paints the same picture. Because here first we learn then of Fox involvement, because they have then given him problems with the casting and rejected that, or at least not rejected it, but at least challenged it. They made alterations to the script and the story just before the movie is about to begin production, so they have to scramble to make it work without those elements. Trank did not take kindly to these things, and probably there were other things as well. We don't really know, but what we do know is that then he reacted in the least constructive way possible by lashing out in anger at seemingly everyone that was near him, be that crew or the producers. He would just lash out, and he obviously also had some issues with his landlord. And then sum it all up, and we get this debacle of a production which is going to go down in movie production hell history.
I think when we talk about the production, we absolutely have to get into the reshoots a bit. Obviously, we have these telltale scenes where Kate Mara's wearing the wig, or they refer to the character who was originally known as Domashev as Von Doom instead. What do you make of that?
The Von Doom switch was basically obvious damage control. I don't think it's that bad that they made that change, even though this character is not Dr. Doom as we know him. He's Dr. Doom in as much as Barakapool is Deadpool.
Barakapool?
Or Dude Peel or whatever. Like, I keep hearing names like Dr. Dumb, Crash Test Doomy, or Mountain Doom because of his green glow.
I love that. They should totally run with that and do a cross-marketing. I think they're allowed to use food products as cross-marketing.
They are. They did Crush. They did Denny's, which is pretty public. They also did some Hostess knockoff.
Yeah, I think I saw that. Not even like high-grade ones. Clobber in Time Ding Dongs or something.
I'm gonna clobber your ding dong.
Maybe the eunuch incident with the Thing actually happened before he was the Thing. Has anybody considered this? That maybe that scene takes place like right before his brother actually like rips his genitals off?
He's like the Theon Greyjoy of comic book superheroes.
Andre, did you have any additional thoughts on the reshoots?
What I think is the most fascinating there, even if they took things out of the movie in advance, Collider claims there were 3 action set pieces taken out of the movie shortly before the production began. Still, they would have a script, even if it was still being rewritten on a day-to-day basis, which is also heavily rumored. They would still have the story in place, so they knew approximately what kind of movie they were getting. And assuming that Trank stuck to that for the most part, then I find it fascinating that they were so displeased with the finished product that they essentially refilmed half the movie, and that's what they've done. Almost half the movie is being refilmed. And what we've also heard is that one of the reasons for the refilming was that Trank's cut was long and boring, which obviously is going to be if they take out 3 action set pieces in advance, which just goes to show me that there was a severe management problem here, that the higher-ups at Fox didn't really know what kind of movie they wanted, or when they made the changes, they didn't know what that would mean, because when they got them, they weren't happy with them either.
So they cut out 40 minutes of footage, and I know part of it seems to be because they weren't finished on the special effects, like the Thing dropping out of the plane and exploding upon landing and kicking all kinds of ass. That was cut. I think the scene between Sue and Johnny fighting each other, I think that was cut. And I'm guessing the reasons for that, the special effects weren't finished on time, and they just had to work with what they had. Which is also why the cut between the first half of the movie and the second half is extremely awkward with the SpongeBob SquarePants style 1 year later title card.
They went on to say later on in the marketing time frame, after this whole not based on any incarnation of the comics didn't work for them, then they started saying it was based on the Ultimate line of the comics. But there's almost nothing from the Ultimate comics there. Yeah, okay, you have some similarity in the origin, but character-wise, there's pretty much nothing.
Right. Like, I mean, I've heard that Sue doesn't really even get to have a character. Like, she just kind of mopes around when she is on the screen.
Yeah, she's on the screen. That's really all you can say about her. She's there.
And the ending, it doesn't really even feel like they're, like, an actual team that's getting together. Like, spoiler alert, Sue and Johnny both lose their dad. Ben and Reed's relationship is strenuous, even though they somehow get over their differences for part of the movie, the ending, just because that's how Hollywood works. Johnny doesn't know Reed, and he's kind of rude to Ben. Like, there's not even like a hint of a friendly rivalry or anything like that in the comics. It's just like he says, "Oh, you're the thing nobody wanted." Sue's not really huge on Reed either. So it's like, instead of like this whole surrogate family dynamic, you have like a dysfunctional family that you were supposed to think, oh, like the movie's trying to convince you, oh, they're best friends, they're the greatest team in the world. No, they're not.
It's like, imagine forming a super team with your coworkers.
And the only thing that we have instead of the traditional banter and friendly teasing between Ben and Johnny is Johnny giving Doom hell for being European, calling him Adolf, to which Doom replies, "I'm still not German," and later calling him Borat, despite Doom hardly having an accent.
And I think that's kind of unfortunate that they mentioned Adolf Hitler, considering that Dr. Doom is a gypsy as far as his heritage goes. And I think they were the most persecuted group after the Jews in the Holocaust.
If you're trying to make a joke, you're trying to be funny, and then their way to do that, to be funny, is to bring in Hitler. Like if it's a stand-up comedian, that's one thing. You know, there's all kinds of awesome Hitler jokes. But this is like a PG-13 movie. This is something that they're trying to attract like families and casual fans in with, and they're like, remember Hitler? That's funny.
They don't even really get into the whole adopted sibling dynamic or anything like that. It's just kind of there.
Yeah, that's one thing I picked up on, is I think they were counting on a lot of social justice support for this movie. All I heard was that people who expected that were very disappointed when they left the theater.
The thing is, the social justice cult, they don't really care about actually seeing anything. They just want to point to something to complain. To
be fair, though, he didn't say Adolf Hitler. That's obviously the association that you're going for. Then I'm like thinking, certainly there must be other German names he could have mentioned to get that thing going there and get some kind of German association, which just goes to show, I think, that Simon Kinberg must be relatively historyless, either him or whoever.
Jeremy Slater and Josh Trank, and supposedly one other guy.
Well, I would think Josh Trank would have known better, because his whole thing on this Kevin Smith podcast that he did was all about trying to play up what a brilliant filmmaker his dad was, and he was apparently somebody who made more than one Holocaust documentary.
Film. Actually, that does sound like something that they would throw in reshoots without his involvement. If it was the scene of him adjusting the seat, it was probably the reshoot that they threw in the whole forced joke angle.
Someone is historyless for writing it and putting it in there to begin with, and all the others are partially guilty for letting it fly. There was another thing that bugged me. As we know by now, it's Doom who goes on to say that why do those astronauts have to go to the other dimension? Why do they have to be the first? We should be the first. No, you shouldn't. You're tech guys.
You have no survival training.
Exactly. They have no business taking the risk of getting stranded there or getting killed there, and then they lose the brains of the operation. That's what you have astronauts and test pilots for. But still, Doom goes on to this rationalization that no one remembers the people who made the moon travel possible. which of course is bullcrap, because the average lot might not know, but anyone with any interest in astronomy knows that the moon travels had not been possible without one man above all others, and that's Werner von Braun. Read up on him. It's a really fascinating story. That Simon Kinberg or the other writers presumably wasn't aware of him, since Doom isn't aware of him. That's kind of a scandal, because this guy, he wasn't obscure or anything. He was the Neil deGrasse Tyson of the 50s and 60s, appearing frequently on TV. And still here, in this movie, no one's heard of him. And that's kind of like leaving out Kepler from history, saying that no one knows the scientist who figured out planetary motions. Yeah, we do. And when they make that kind of mistake, it just takes away from the movie.
Plus, there were so many scientists that worked on the thing. It wasn't just like 4 teenagers who came up with a battle plan and suddenly changed the world. It was like, if you had everyone involved, not only did you train them for like 2 years apiece or whatever and get them all ready, you would have to stuff them into the rocket equivalent of a clown car in order to get them to work. Because there would be like hundreds of people on that shuttle, and then only one of them would get to be the quote-unquote first. So it's kind of a moot point anyway. The thing about the movie that bugs me is during the huge exposition that's supposed to be the halfway point climax of the movie is that Sue is not present at all. She is at the base, chilling, basically, and I'm guessing this is because of reshoots. The fact that she's left out of the initial incident that turns this group of characters into the Fantastic Four is insulting to the source material and to her as a character, especially considering that Trank was previously playing her up as this feminist icon, like not a slutty secretary, as he quote-unquote put it on an interview.
Really? So I hadn't even caught that.
Yeah, I think it was like comicbook.com or something. He basically was saying that early versions of Sue as a character were kind of unfortunate, and I can get that with like the very early portrayals because that was just kind of the 60s. And then basically the modern interpretations of the character now are much more interesting, and I wish they had gone with more of that because it doesn't sound like they did anything with her other than have her be the mopey character.
What I took from it was that she was the invisible woman even before she became invisible. Because yeah, we see that there was obviously something going on in the past between Doom and her that we don't learn anything more about, and we see that Reed Richards had some kind of interest in her that is obviously not followed up anywhere else, but no one really cares about her. And then when she takes off and the 3 guys, that would be Doom, Reed, and Johnny, start talking about, we should go to the other dimension, we should be the first ones, then they don't think about calling her. No one asks, hey, maybe we should call Sue in for this? But no, they don't care about her. She's not mentioned by a word. Of course, Reed, he has to send a message to his old buddy from the scrapyard, which has been away the last 20 minutes of the movie, and who Johnny and Doom has never even met. But still, he's coming along. They're waiting for him to come across the other side of town, whereas Sue, who presumably is in the building, she isn't welcome. They do send a monkey, and the monkey comes back fine. For one reason, it never left the pod. And it would have been the same with this case. If Reed and Doom and Johnny and Ben had just gone there and gone back, they'd probably be fine. And if they had gone there, gone out, stepped on the ground, and gone back in, they'd probably also be fine. But it was that they went there, went out on the ground, started minding climbing down a cliff, started looking at, there's some kind of energy over here, let's go look at it. There's green lava, I wonder what happens if I stick my hand in it.
They were somehow more foolish than the crew of the Prometheus, which was composed of the brightest minds. They lacked common sense because they're in a horror movie. Unfortunately, this is not a horror movie, so they don't even get that excuse of plot-induced stupidity.
And also, the crew of the Prometheus were not the entire brains of the operations. They were the experts within their fields, but they weren't the brains of the whole operation. And here you then have Reed Richards, who is supposed to be one of the smartest people on the planet. You'd think that he knows that maybe we shouldn't stray too far away just to play it safe.
Doesn't no one react really to the death of Franklin Storm, who actually does way more to bring the team together than Reed?
The thing is that you can, of course, give Franklin Storm credit for bringing them all together, because I really didn't like his character all that much. He's a great actor. The actor did amazing, but the character was written really poorly, because all he does is go around trying to adopt everyone he sees. He also fills people with ideas that sometimes are noble and other times are really stupid. Like, for instance, he was the one who gave Doom and everyone else the idea that they should be the first ones to go to this other dimension. That took everyone by surprise, because no one was able to think of something so utterly stupid by themselves.
Who cares if you die? You'll be famous.
I was surprised they didn't try to adopt the government man.
Who is not actually Mole Man. They changed his name in Reshoots for some reason. And I'm guessing it's because if they wanted to do a franchise after all this, that they would have killed off Mole Man, and they couldn't really do that.
Yeah, probably someone were smart enough to figure that, oh wait a second, this is Mole Man. If we kill him now, it's going to be difficult to bring him back, especially the way they kill him. Doom blew his head up, and there's no coming back from that.
Before the other brother hits Ben, he says it's clobbering time. Depressing. That sounds like something that the people on Robot Chicken would come up with as like a throwaway joke.
Precisely. Yeah, I saw that asserted, and I had actually never heard that before anybody had seen the movie. So I wonder if they didn't just sneak it in somewhere that this is something that apparently he said.
He said it pretty quietly. I mean, it was like right after he was yelling after it, and then he just quietly says it's clobbering time. So that basically makes the supposedly climactic take onto him saying it makes it really dark. I think it would have worked if it would have been like his brother was just horseplaying with him and they were being friendly, and it was just something he says to remember his family.
But instead it takes on like this Buffalo Billish quality.
I'd clobber me hard.
It's really unlikely that a sequel is going to come, which begs the question, now what?
Yeah, so I guess one possibility that's been mentioned is that they might just scrap Fantastic Four 2 and just put Deadpool 2 into that slot, which I don't even know if they'd formally announced Deadpool 2, but with the positive feelings people are having about it, it seems like that's a much smarter move than Fantastic Four 2. I mean, how could they possibly, especially with the loss they're seeing this weekend, how could they possibly justify another Fantastic Four?
And that would be a lot better than, say, sequel to a movie that no one wanted to begin with. A sequel that you didn't ask for a movie that you didn't ask for.
Yeah, because the Fantastic Four are now poisoned as a brand. There's no way to get back to that. Fox, they can do a reboot, they can do a sequel. It's not going to work. It's going to be a huge bomb. It's going to bomb even worse than Punisher Warzone. So that franchise is dead. And we see that really clearly with Fox now coming out and saying very clearly, this movie was in a separate universe, and it was never going to cross over with the X-Men. Very different tune from what we heard just before the movie opened.
Right, they still teased, like, maybe we can do an X-Men crossover, but we'd have to think about it. But at the way they were saying it, it was kind of like, we're not gonna do one. We could, but we're not. I don't think they're going to bother even discussing the crossover at this point, because this movie has been so poorly received, it's done so terribly. An X-Men Fantastic Four crossovers would not make, like, Avengers money. It would probably make less money than the regular X-Men movies if you were getting into it.
It would ruin both franchises in one.
And, like, it's saying a lot considering they basically spent 5 years after X-Men Origins Wolverine trying to fix everything with First Class, The Wolverine, and X-Men Days of Future Past, and now we're going on into Deadpool and X-Men The Wrath of Ivan Ooze. The survey was apparently handed out right after a screening of one of the movies, and that basically should tell you that if Fox is handing out a survey of what to do with the franchise right then, they're not going to continue with this iteration of the team. They might actually consider going to Marvel and begging them for help after quietly refusing their humble request for Silver Surfer and Galactus way back when.
So they were actually asking people in the audience what they should do with Fantastic Four.
In at least one screening. The Nerdpocalypse the user at those nerds on Twitter just said that at a screening of Fantastic Four that occurred on August the 8th, Fox is passing out a survey to decide what to do with the franchise. It's like Sony with Spider-Man, except at least Spider-Man broke even, didn't profit nearly as much as they hoped. But it broke even, made some money, and they still had no idea what to do with it, because they wrote themselves into a hole. So Fox is out there after one movie. I don't know the details of the survey, but I'm pretty sure a lot of people were going to write down, give it back to Marvel Studios as a response. If they're holding a survey, it's basically a sign that they don't really want to do much with the franchise going forward, unless they have to. I think Fantastic Four has become Fox's albatross.
Yeah, what I'm hoping with that is that every single person who answered that survey wrote, give the rights back to Marvel. And I'm pretty sure there is a faction in Fox who is already rooting for that. Maybe not give it back, but at least come to some kind of arrangement with Marvel. Something mutually beneficial, ideally more beneficial for Fox from their point of view.
It would be hard not to find something more beneficial. This rights grab reboot has been a major landmine for them.
Bleeding Cool just did a report about how Fox had this internal civil war of people thinking this movie was utter garbage and this movie was not very great but still presentable, that they thought they could have an okay opening weekend. And the report mentioned that there would be a final trailer release to try and win everybody over, and it didn't. But it did come out, and it did have a little Deadpool tag at the end, which was easily the best thing to come out of this. If that's going on, then I am pretty sure at this point they have, say, okay, get Kevin on the phone. We need Feige's help on this. I think the only reason that they wouldn't is because they'd be worried that they would lose the rights to X-Men too, but at the same time I could see them stalling off on buying X-Men for a while, because their setting is pretty full as it is, even with the addition of Fantastic Four, Silver Surfer, and all the cosmic goodies that come with those characters.
Yeah, I think that X-Men is a lost cause, and Marvel knows this, and they've no doubt set their sights on the Fantastic Four, and they'd be happy to get them. And furthermore, we're closer right now than ever before to the Fantastic Four one way or the other reverting to Marvel. Because of course, if Fox wants to be dicks, they can just sit on it for another decade without doing anything. But they get nothing from that. And we know that Fox have been talking about an X-Men TV series that they intend to do, provided they get Marvel's permission to do it. And I think that the Fantastic Four rights just became a bargaining chip in that fight.
Absolutely. I don't expect a Fantastic Four movie or television show or anything to happen until, Phase 4, so to speak, which would be thematically appropriate. At the same time, I could think that Disney could still use those characters in the cartoons again. They would have an excuse to use those characters to make those toys or whatever, and they could still start making up money off of them quickly, even though the characters aren't going to be seen on film again for at least another 5 years.
Because I've seen several who speculate that Marvel would be willing to give away both X-Men TV rights in addition to X-Men merchandising rights in return for the Fantastic Four. Now that I don't believe for a second is going to happen. There is no way that Marvel is going to give up merchandising rights. No way. A trade-off where they exchange the X-Men TV rights and the Fantastic Four movie rights, possibly with some cash changing hands along the way, that is a definite possibility.
The thing is that deal with the merchandise and the TV rights and everything, that happened with Marvel and Sony right before the Amazing Spider-Man series began as its own Sony thing unrelated to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So there is precedent for this kind of deal.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting to see. There's no doubt going to be some very tough negotiations moving forward.
So who has the X-Men TV rights now? Does Marvel have those?
Marvel right now has the X-Men TV rights, so they are the ones who can make an X-Men TV series, but they can't do that without Fox's approval. And Fox can't make a TV series at all, because they haven't got the X-Men TV rights, period. And this is slightly reminiscent of another situation which goes beyond Marvel, but it still involves Fox, namely Batman. More specifically, the Batman TV series of the 1960s, where the rights were shared between Fox and Warner, and that is what held up the release of this TV series both on VHS and on DVD until it was released on Blu-ray last year. And why did that get released? Well, let's just say it got released and announced very shortly after Fox announced that Gotham would be coming. So there was some kind of trade-off behind the scenes. So there is precedent for that. What would you all like to see happen if we move into wishful thinking territory? Assuming that Marvel gets the rights back wholesale.
Time travel. I think it's integral that they get introduced in the 1960s or something. It would be interesting to have a story tied with Doctor Doom, like to be Doctor Doom's origin story as well as the Fantastic Four. On another scale, I would also be interested in seeing if they do like the shared rights deal, as if they can do an actual adaptation of Old Man Logan, completely unconnected to the other films, and instead they go all Mad Max with it, which would be balls to the wall rad.
I can see a trade-off where the Fantastic Four now revert to Marvel. And in such a case, I do not want to see them announce a Fantastic Four movie right off the bat. That wouldn't work, because the characters and the name right now are toxic. So rather, I'd like to see them be introduced gradually. You can introduce the Silver Surfer, who is attached to the Fantastic Four rights, right away in a future Guardians of the Galaxy or other cosmic Marvel movie. And you can have Reed Richards introduced in the Avengers line of movies, in either Captain America or a future Iron Man or a future Avengers. There you can introduce Reed Richards.
Early in the storyline.
Yeah, early in the storyline, before they become the Four, you can still introduce this brilliant scientist who comes to the aid of the Avengers. And he happens to have this girlfriend, Sue, who we have referenced. And then, concurrently, you can establish Doom, making reference to the political situation in Latveria. There has been a coup d'etat. Someone has taken over. What do we know about this guy? For instance, that could be a restructured Shields or someone else expressing concern over this dictator.
There's lots of precedent for Doom being a villain for other Marvel characters. He's sort of like a lot of the Spider-Man villains are, where he sort of seems to travel around. In fact, you even had Punisher go up against Doom, and of course he couldn't win that fight one-on-one, but they kind of cleverly worked their way into him basically blackmailing Doom.
Exactly, and that's what I would like to see happen. Delay the Fantastic Four, but bring in the secondary characters right away. Build up Doom. He is the most important villain Marvel has. I mean, this is the guy that Darth Vader is a ripoff of. He's not just a villain, he's the anti-hero. He's someone that the audience actually is going to show up for. He's going to be a proper developed character in his own right. And he can show up across many different movies and be part of many concurrent storylines, but always as a villain, but a villain that the audience digs. After Doom has been properly established, then you can gradually establish that he and Reed Richards knew each other from before, and then have the accident where the Fantastic Four have been created.
What do you see in the way of casting?
Well, for Reed Richards, I would think that you need someone who is closer to the more traditional incarnation of Mr. Fantastic. That would be not an awkward geek, someone who fits into the Big Bang Theory like Miles Teller does, but someone who is a more fatherly type, a strict fatherly type, someone more arrogant, someone who is very similar to Doctor Doom himself. So I would cast someone who can come across as a patriarch type, just to go against expectations, but go a little bit back to source. I would very much like to see John Hamm take on the role. If not John Hamm, then someone like John Hamm. But I'd be willing to take a slightly older Reed Richards, again to drill in this family thing, because obviously Sue and Ben, they're all in their 20s at their very youngest, so he needs to be older and come across as the more mature, the father figure. And for Doom, you need someone who can pull off being the smartest person in the room, and I did not get that from Toby Kebbell at all. But beyond that, he needs to come across as someone exceptionally intelligent, someone constantly scheming, someone who can walk into the room and he knows instantly everything about everyone there just by observing them. You need to have someone who really radiates, I am royalty. The perfect actor for that would be Mats Mikkelsen, best known from Hannibal, the TV series.
And especially since he's probably looking for something to do right now.
He's accented enough that it's going to work. It's going to be interesting to see what they do, and we're going to cover whatever actually happens next.
Definitely, before we wrap up, want to say a special thank you to Troll in the Dungeon for all the awesome contributions. We could not have done a lot of this without you.
Thank you for creating the awesome podcasts. I originally just conceived the original post that I started. I just did that for frame of reference, but once it took off, thanks to you and the people who spread it around, I really got to help to get this whole story about what went wrong out there. I think you guys have done a better job than even I could have, so thank you so much for what you've done, and thanks for bringing me on board. I'm huge fans of yours. Rock on.
Oh, thank you. That's kind words.
If you liked this video, don't forget to hit subscribe so you can catch all of our upcoming videos. For more podcasts, news, and reviews, check us out at midnightsedge.net and follow us on Twitter at midnightsedge. Also check out our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/midnightsedge.